Hi there, my name is Warren Pohl. I'm one of the co-founders at 33 Shake and welcome to another episode of the 33 Shake vlog. Today's video is all about what happens when science is misused in sports nutrition, how to understand what the science really means behind certain sports nutrition products, and how to make sure that you and or your performance are not being taken for a ride by bad science or worse marketing. Because at 33 Shake, our mission is delivering maximum value to endurance athletes, and we do it in these vlogs by sharing the very best in training, nutrition and mindset tips and tricks for motivation and your performance in endurance sport. And we do it in store at 33shake.com with our groundbreaking natural sports nutrition products. Now with all that said, let's get into what happens when science attacks. If you go and take a look in the sports drinks industry, you'll see how ordinary sports nutrition can take science, turn it on its head, and really make it something very different, all in the name of marketing. And today we're going to be examining how that playbook really works so that you can spot it next time it rears its ugly head and make sure it doesn't upset your performance or your well-being. If we look over the years, there has been a lot of crazy stunts and stuff done in the name of marketing. And if we were to look for major mishaps, frankly, messing around with some stuff for sports nutrition isn't going to come close. There are far bigger blunders out there. Let's just take, for example, Mitsubishi, the car company, launching a car called the Pajero into the Spanish market and wondering why sales were slow, only to later discover that Pajero in Spanish, and apologies to all Spanish listeners here, is Spanish for someone who enjoys pleasuring themselves or may not be a nice person, possibly a combination of the two. Things like that are much funnier and entertaining and make the compilation of worst ever adverts at Christmas and that sort of thing. That's funny when marketing goes wrong that way. But when marketing is mixed up with hokey science to sell you stuff that either doesn't do what it's supposed to do or may actively be bad for you, that's where we think it starts to leave a slightly worse taste in the back of the throat. Particularly when that stuff and those products are designed for an audience, in our case athletes, who are actively seeking health and performance. And this is why we absolutely salute the award-winning investigative journalist and medical doctor, Dr Deborah Cohen, for her brilliant work uncovering the truth behind sports drinks. And she went into this in great detail. She's done a lot of study and report on it, a lot of investigations on it. And there's a rather brilliant podcast from the British Journal of Sports Medicine where she outlines what her and her team discovered when they started investigating sports drinks. You can find the links to that podcast in the show notes. Highly recommend listening to it. It's absolutely illuminating. We're going to go through some of the highlights that we saw in it now. And the first thing that Cohen and her team came across were the fact that science sells. As she said, the sports drink industry realised very quickly that science sells. At the time though, this being the 1980s, there was no science around sports drinks, didn't exist. And she explains how the sports drink pioneers held scientific symposia because they needed to create a science around sports drinks. And the result was that pretty soon they had data and formula available for how you should drink for your performance and ways to measure sweat rate and all that sort of thing that would make people perform better. And she says they were scientific in their messaging, telling people to calculate their sweat loss, their work rate, and to calculate how much fluid they would lose during an endurance event and therefore how much they should drink. Now really this sounds very helpful and pretty useful. So far so good, we'd say. We come to lesson 2. Science quantity trumps science quality. Because this is where things start to come unstuck a little bit. The messages that the industry is putting out as a result of this science seemed off to someone who had a medical background. And as Cohen said, she said there were all sorts of things that we saw in the messaging. Things like drink ahead of your thirst and your brain can't tell you when you feel thirsty. That was counter to everything I was taught at medical school, she said. I thought it was your brain that told you when you're thirsty. Now to anyone who has ever heard the outdated dogma, eat before you're hungry and your brain can't tell you when you're hungry, or when you're hungry it's too late. This might all start to be sounding disappointingly familiar. And it is, because it's basically straight out of the same playbook. What's being done or has been done in the world of sports drinks also plays into energy gel, protein powders, drink mixes, the lot. Now, as it turns out, the science behind these claims wasn't very good. As Cohen said, there were all sorts of tricks going on in the studies. They were given a lot of data. They got over 100 clinical trials from major sports drink manufacturers, and this is where the surprises started to pop out, because bear in mind her background: medical doctor, editor at the British Medical Journal, and someone who's done a lot of high-level investigation into things that really could cause serious harm, things where patient harms during trials have maybe been buried, things like that. You know, people were potentially dying as a result of this. She's very used to analysing clinical trials, and in her words, for someone who's used to pharmaceutical research, which I normally look at, the studies that they've been given, they were not clinical trials. They were studies of various types and often quite poorly conducted. As she says, I remember one study where the participants were asked to fast overnight, and then one group was given water and one group was given sports drink. And what do you know? The sports drink group did better. Which on the surface allows it to be said it's scientifically proven that sports drink is better than water in this instance. Whereas that's not what's been tested. When would you ever fast before an endurance event anyway? So how is this repeatable in the real world? But most importantly, all that's really been proven there is some calories, i.e. the calories in the sports drink, are better for you than no calories, because water has no calories in it. You don't need to be a scientist to work that out. That's really just a statement of the bleeding obvious, as opposed to some revolutionary scientific discovery. And Cohen puts it far more succinctly than I just have. You can infer very little from that, she says. There was no good evidence for the claims, and the science was fairly poor. And if this, again, sounds like a repeat of another story, that's because it is. In a separate investigation, a team from Oxford University examined, I believe it was 104 claims, or was it 430 claims for 140 products? Or let's face it, they examined over 100 claims for over 100 products in the sports arena, and they found, in their own words, a worrying lack of scientific evidence backing these claims up. We come on to lesson 3 in the sports nutrition playbook here: control the message at its source. Having created all this science for all these products, and having created the authority that science brings, what you now need to do is make sure that your science dominates the conversation. And how would you do this? Well, you would start at the source, which is scientific journals, which to the layperson you would imagine are sources of absolutely unimpeachable intellectual integrity. But Cohen says that in many cases, the sports drink industry's main advisors were on the payroll of the journal companies, and people said to me that you just couldn't get studies published that showed that sports drinks didn't have any particular effect on performance. She goes on to say, so you had a massive publication bias in favour of studies that purportedly showed that sports drinks did have an effect on performance, and even then the science was poor quality. So this, again, to the layperson, we'd think a scientific journal is an absolutely a perfect source. Maybe not the case with some of these. But then beyond controlling the message at source, the fourth part in the playbook is control the message at the top level as well, because journals are just the beginning. Now you need elite credibility, and how do you do that? Well, ideally you'd go with sports governing bodies, so let's say FIFA, the IOC, the International Olympic Committee, people like that get involved at the top level. And as Cohen explains, this is how you have experts around the world who are advisors to the International Olympic Committee and FIFA and all these other people, who were sponsored by sports drink companies. And then again, these people's own advisors were also on the payroll of the sports drink companies. And the result is that these institutions at the very highest level, they take up the party line that's been uncovered or discovered or created in these apparently scientific reports and then backed up in the journals, and then it filters into the elite sport at the top level and filters down through coaching bodies and athletes, which is just another part of the reason why a lot of our elite athletes actually have terrible sports nutrition. And if you want to know more about that, we've written about that on the blog. You'll find the links to that in the show notes below. So the last piece of the puzzle is to not let any adverse results to your findings get in the way of good sales. After the train is now moving, it's left the station, you want to keep it moving, don't want it getting derailed. So you have to make sure, as best as possible, that if there is an alternative viewpoint coming out or someone's questioning your evidence, that doesn't then see the light of day. And Cohen explained how a senior physio at one of the national football leagues in the UK did a study with their footballers, and what they did was they got the footballers to drink and hydrate in line with the sports drink industry guidelines. And what they found was all the players just felt sick because they had too much fluid churning around in their stomachs. And these guys, they tried to publish their research, but they didn't get anywhere. So if this is all just a little bit too depressing and it feels like there's some gargantuan conspiracy, which means that anything decent in sports nutrition is never going to see the light of day, and you can't tell one bit of good science from one bit of terrible science, there's a really, really brilliant ray of sunshine that we have for all of you, because there's a great way to tell immediately whether the science is to be taken at face value or not. And this is personal experience. It's the gold standard. It doesn't matter what the scientific report says. It doesn't matter what an elite athlete says. It doesn't matter what your best mate says. It doesn't matter what everybody else is doing. Just because everyone else is doing it, it must be good. Well, maybe not. If you find a lack of expected results, if you don't enjoy certain products, if they make you feel sick, if they do not give you the stable energy, or if they simply do not deliver on their claims, that is honestly all you need to know. You're not wrong in the face of this really authoritative, perfect science. It doesn't matter what the science says. If the science says this should happen and you experience the opposite, and that opposite is negative and you don't enjoy it and it spoils your performance, you don't need to worry. Just don't ever use that product again. It is as simple as that. Personal experience is the gold standard in an area such as sports nutrition, where unfortunately much science has been hijacked so badly to be basically pointless. And then we come to the internet, because even though the internet has given us about 1 million new pointless ways to waste our time, it's also an absolute font of knowledge. You may have to dig through a few places to find it, but even if these traditional sources of authoritative information like science journals or mainstream media, even if they have been derailed and hijacked, there's absolutely no way that the free flow of decent information can be stopped now that we have the internet on our side. So roll up your sleeves, get stuck in, dig through the digital data dump and find the trusted sources that make sense to you and that speak to you. Look, hope that's useful for you and your performance. Hope you've enjoyed it. If you want to get in touch with us, you got any comments, anything you'd like to share, please do so. You'll find our email details and all of our social media contacts in the show notes below. And if you're looking for the very best in sports nutrition for your performance, why not check us out at 33shake.com? And please, absolutely, we implore you, base your decision on whether or not our products work for you on your personal experience. We would expect you to do absolutely no less. And remember, if for any reason you find that our products aren't holding up on their claims, or they're simply not working in your personal use, then don't even worry about it. Our 30-day, 100% money-back guarantee has your back. We stand by everything we make. We want you to be happy. We want you to perform better. It's all we're here to do. So that's always got you covered. Thanks very much for checking this out.